G'day, Keith here. Welcome to the Kilted Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Keith the Kilt Man Robinson. This is a very special podcast episode because this is my 50th episode, or my 50th proper episode, I guess. I have done more than 50. I've done a few little bonus episodes, but this is my 50th kind of official episode. So I want to thank everyone that's been listening to all the episodes up till now. And it's very much appreciated. And if this is the first one you've listened to, go back and check out the other 49. So anyway, here we go with episode 50. And I do kind of want to let you know that I'm actually in the gym doing a workout myself. So as I record this, I guess I'm in the office on the tools as I record this episode. So if you do hear, the odd gym related noise, I try to keep that to a minimum. Obviously, as I do my sets, I'm going to pause the episode so you don't hear my grunting and carrying on. So I'm just kind of like multitasking, I guess. Here I'm doing my own workout and recording this episode. So this episode is all about barbells versus dumbbells. So basically, like some of the differences between training with barbells and training with dumbbells, and kind of like deciding which to use for various situations and to kind of get the most out of your workout. I did an episode way back in episode 13 about the difference between free weights and machines, and I pointed out kind of the pros and cons of each in that. So go back and check that one out if you like. But this one I'm specifically going to talk about the difference between dumbbells and barbells. Now, you might from time to time during this episode hear me like kind of, I guess, breathing a little bit heavy. As I said, I am in the gym doing my own workout, and even though I'm pausing while I do the set, I'm actually doing a leg day, so I'm doing squats. So, I'm a little bit out of breath after a set. So, that's the reason why. Anyway, during this episode, I'm going to talk about dumbbells versus barbells. I'll start off with like the broad difference and the broad kind of pros and cons of each, and then I'm going to go on to like individual muscle groups and talk about like the differences between using dumbbells and barbells for various lifts. So let's first talk about what is a dumbbell, what is a barbell. So I know this is probably pretty common knowledge to most of you, but I just wanted to cover it first. So basically the main difference between a dumbbell and a barbell is a barbell is designed to be held with two hands. A dumbbell is designed to be held with one hand. So a barbell is like a bar where you put weights on either end. Could be preloaded. Sometimes you can get preloaded barbells, but usually they're adjustable. You can put weights on either end and adjust the weights. A dumbbell is a much shorter bar, or sometimes they're like a molded thing that's molded to a certain weight. They're usually like a predetermined weight. You can get adjustable dumbbells, but usually they're a predetermined weight, and they're designed to be used with one hand. So look, the main difference between a dumbbell and a barbell is the barbell is designed to be used with two hands, the dumbbell with one hand. So let's talk about some of the kind of pros and cons to using each. So let's start with the barbell. So the main thing with the barbell, because you're using two hands, um, you can usually lift more weight than using two dumbbells. This is because you've got more balance. You don't have to worry about balance quite so much as you do when you're using two dumbbells. Um, and and also because quite often your your stronger side kind of takes up the slack. We all have, a side that's slightly not as strong as the other side. So the stronger side, the dominant side, if especially if it's not paying a lot of attention to your form, your stronger side will take up the slack a lot more. And that's one of the big advantages of your barbell is that you can lift a lot more weight than if you were lifting two dumbbells. So you can't really compare your barbell PB with the equivalent in dumbbells. So for example, if you were to bench press, 80 kilos on a barbell, that doesn't equate to two 40-kilo dumbbells, because, you're more stable with the barbell lift, um, and, your stronger hands there to pick up the slack if your weaker hand decides to slack off. So barbells are good for lifting a lot of weight, obviously. If you go for a PB or if you just want to increase the load on what you're lifting. Things to watch for, as I said, that kind of stronger hand dominance. So this is where a good spotter comes in handy, or a mirror. You kind of want to make sure that you're pushing with your non-dominant side just as much as with your dominant side. So if you say, for example, if you're doing a bench press or an overhead press, and you look in the mirror and you see your right hand coming up further than your left hand or ahead of your left hand, that means your left hand's slacking off. Other things to watch for is your barbells a little bit more unsafe than your dumbbells, especially with lifts like your bench press, um, essentially because you've got a bar going across your chest. So if you get stuck, it's more difficult to get yourself out of trouble for, getting yourself from under that bar. So, where you would use a barbell is, if you've got a spotter, a good spotter with you. If you're by yourself, you might want to rethink to using a dumbbell. Other things that barbells are good for are when you outgrow kind of like the biggest dumbbell. As I said, dumbbells are usually like pre-made or pre-molded to a certain weight, and quite often there's a certain limit to the biggest dumbbell you can get, whereas barbells you can keep adding weight to it. Sometimes too it gets impractical to continue to use dumbbells. For example, with a squat, as you become stronger, there's only so many dumbbells you can pick up, whereas a barbell you've kind of like got not infinite, but you've got like more and more weights you can continue to add to that bar. Another disadvantage with your barbell sometimes is that you may not be able to get a good range of motion. So that's particularly if, for example, go back to bench press again. If you have like a large chest and you actually can't get the full range of motion because the bar is resting across your chest. So let's talk about dumbbells now, pros and cons of dumbbells. And Look, I'm going to start with the cons because there's really only one con with dumbbells, and that's that you can't lift as much. Well, two cons really. Firstly, you can't lift as much, and secondly, you can't load on as much weight, so eventually you're going to outgrow them. So going back to the first point, you can't lift as much as I mentioned with the barbells. When you're lifting dumbbells, there's a lot more happening because each side needs to work independently from the other. So you've kind of got a bit more of an unstable base. So going back to the bench press again, you've got a bar, you've got two hands on that barbell. You're more stable than if you are like holding two separate dumbbells. So you usually find what will happen is the first thing you need to do when you have those dumbbells raised in the up position of the bench press is that you actually need to steady them, and it's actually quite harder to steady those dumbbells, more difficult than if you were to steady the barbell. So if you imagine like on a machine, like you're on a machine, like a laying bench press machine, everything's pretty stable. You know, you haven't got anything waving around in there, pretty stable. So you can lift quite a lot of weight because, you know, there isn't as much going on. Bring that down to a barbell bench press, and you're listening a little bit less because you need to steady that bar in the air. Now bring that down to dumbbells, and you need to steady each individual dumbbell. So you've got two dumbbells as opposed to one barbell that you need to steady. And because there's so much more going on there, you can't lift as much. Second reason you can't lift as much is because your weaker side can't slack off. So when you're on the barbell, if your weaker side decided to have a bit of a budge, the stronger side would pick up the slack. But with dumbbells, this can't happen. So there's kind of a disadvantage and an advantage, because disadvantage, you know, you can't lift as much. Advantage is that you're forcing that weaker side to do its fair share of the work. So it's kind of like, it's an advantage and a disadvantage. But yeah, they're the two reasons why you can't lift as much with dumbbells as you can with barbells. The second con to dumbbells is you just can't load up as much weight. And also, like, sometimes it's not practical to do that particular exercise with like bigger dumbbells. For example, like it gets to a point with a squat, you know, when you can no longer hold, you know, like enough dumbbells to make to make it sufficiently challenging. So that's where your barbell kind of comes in handy, because you know you can keep loading more and more plates on your barbell. So advantages of dumbbells over barbells. So the first thing is that in many circumstances they can be safer. So I'll go back once again to the bench press. If you have obviously if you have a bar across your chest and it's too heavy and you can't push it up again, you're in a bit of trouble. Whereas with two dumbbells, you can get yourself out of trouble a lot easier. And another advantage, and you'll probably realize that these advantages are the reverse of the disadvantages of the barbell. But another advantage is the range of motion. You can quite often get a better range of motion with dumbbells than you can with barbells, especially in things like your your bench press, your bent over row. But so quite often our body gets in the way. So with your bench press, you might have a big chest, and you can't get deep enough into the press. You can't get the weight down low enough to get the full range of motion. A bent over barbell row, for example, quite often your body can get in the way and you can't get um, you know, your elbows back far enough, particularly, and dare I say, particularly if you have like a larger waistline. So yeah, better range of motion with the bent over dumbbell row, for example. You can get that further back because you don't have your body in the way. With the dumbbell press, you can get those dumbbells down further than you can often with your barbell. And the other advantage is you're kind of working on that weaker side, kind of trying to force it to get stronger, to kind of bridge that gap between your stronger side and your weaker side. Your dominant side is always going to be stronger than your non-dominant side. We all know that. We're not robots. We're not we're not perfectly symmetrical, but you kind of want to minimize that difference in strength between your stronger and weaker side. Balance. You're also working on kind of balance a lot more. Yeah, so there's a lot more involved in those dumbbell lifts. There's a lot more going on with balance happening. Kind of like those little tendons and stuff like that connect your muscle to the joint. They're working a bit harder because they're not as stable. So you're kind of forcing yourself to be a bit more unstable. So yeah, look, don't let anyone tell you dumbbells are like a step down from barbells. Dumbbells do have their advantages. They definitely do. And look, there's no overall winner out of these two. I'm not going to say, and one's better than the other. They both have their places. They both have, the different times that you would use them. There's not one that's better than the other. I use both in my workouts. Not often, usually not on the same day. I won't on the same day usually do dumbbell bench press and barbell bench press, but I'll definitely, in the course of my workouts, utilize them both at some point. If I find one side, my weaker side, my non-dominant side, is getting fairly, a lot weaker than my dominant side, I might work on the dumbbell work, a lot more than the barbell work, but I tend to mix and match to get the most out of both. If I'm going for, a big workout where I'm lifting lots of weight, I'm obviously going to use barbells over dumbbells. So now that I've talked about the overall differences between training with dumbbells and barbells, I'm going to talk about like individual like exercises for muscle groups. So I'm actually going to go through the main five, the big five lifts that I've talked about in many of my podcast episodes before: the squat, the deadlift, the bench press, the row, and the overhead press. So let's talk about squats first, which is only fitting. It's nice and fresh on my mind because I've just finished my squat workout. I'm just unloading the bar now as I speak. So let's talk about the barbell squat. And there's several ways I've done a whole episode on squats, so I'm not going to rehash this whole thing. But a barbell back squat is essentially you have a bar across your back, and you're squatting with that barbell. Advantages to that, you can continue to load more and more weight onto the bar as you need to, as opposed to like the dumbbell alternate, which would be a dumbbell goblet squat, or sometimes you see people doing those dumbbell squats where they kind of like holding one on each shoulder. So eventually, if you're doing dumbbell squats, you're going to come to the point where your legs become so strong that no dumbbell is going to like be sufficient. So if you're talking about the goblet squat, which is where you hold a dumbbell in front of your body, if you did happen to find a dumbbell that was sufficiently heavy enough for you to do a squat, chances are your arms would not be able to hold it, and you'd be finishing your set not because your legs have exhausted, but because your arms are. So when we do any exercise, any strength exercise, you want to look at the target muscle, and that needs to be your fail point when that muscle can't do anymore. So if you're doing a squat exercise, but you can't do any more because your arm's tired, it's kind of not much of a leg workout, is it? So, you might be able to find a 60 kilo dumbbell, but to hold that in the goblet position in front of you, I guarantee you it's not your legs that are going to be tiring out first, it's going to be your arms. Yeah, so for legs, for squats, yeah, definitely most of my workouts are done with a barbell. And yeah, I probably I don't think I've done a dumbbell goblet squat for a long time, except when I've kind of been demonstrating it to other people. So it's a good kind of beginner, a good start out in a goblet squat. But eventually you're going to outgrow those dumbbells, or the dumbbell you need to lift is going to be too big for your arms to lift. So yeah, your arms are going to be at the point of failure before your legs are. The other kind of dumbbell squat I've seen where people hold a dumbbell on their shoulders, um, it's kind of like awkward looking. I've never actually seen anyone carry this out with sufficiently heavy weight and maintain good squat technique. So yeah, with squats, for me, yeah, definitely barbells. Once you get past that point of you know, outgrowing the biggest dumbbell or not being able to hold the biggest dumbbell. The thing about anything to do with our legs is our legs are very powerful. We're going to outgrow weights pretty quickly. Um, our upper bodies, they're not as strong because obviously we don't walk on our hands. So, they're not as strong as our legs. Our legs are powerful muscles between our legs, glutes and hamstrings. We're capable of lifting a lot of weight. So, yeah, much more than, a dumbbell. So while we're on legs, I'll just quickly mention the deadlift. Um, so once again, like the squat, you're going to reach a limitation where you cannot find a dumbbell big enough to be able to deadlift. So it is possible to deadlift with a dumbbell. Um, so if you're using a single dumbbell, you could put that in the middle of your legs and kind of like go down in deadlift position and grab the dumbbell, stand up, bring it to either side, and you could alternate hands, so one hand's not particularly getting worn out before the other. So you alternate hands when you're doing that. But yeah, once again, as with the squat, you're going to get to that point where you've just outgrown those dumbbells and you need to use a barbell. I do understand that can be an awkward position. The barbell deadlift can be an awkward position. But you can use what's called a hex bar, which is kind of like you stand in the middle of it and you have your hands by your side and then you lift that way. Yeah, so you look, your squats and your deadlift, big leg exercises. Obviously, you're going to outgrow those dumbbells and need to lift more, and that's where you're going to need that barbell. The one leg, well, I guess it's an all body workout, but it does work the legs. But where dumbbells do particularly come in handy is the farmer's carry, and that's where you pretty much lift a weight in each side and just walk with it. So you get a dumbbell each side, go into a deadlift position, pick it up safely, and then keep walking. You know, basically you have to put the dumbbells down, but that's a really good it's going to work your whole body. It's actually quite an amazing exercise because you're doing a deadlift, but then you're also using your shoulders for your core just to walk with this weight. So obviously you can't do this with a barbell. So 2 dumbbells, pair of kettlebells, very good with that. With this, also where a dumbbell might come in handy for leg work is your split leg work. So things like Bulgarian split squats, walking lunges, and things like that. You might want to hold a dumbbell in the goblet position, or one in each hand. And these are more effective because your split squat or your lunge is a much more difficult exercise than your squat. So you're not going to be able to lift as much weight. So the overall weight you're lifting isn't going to be as important. You can really you don't need a lot of weight behind a split squat. By the time your body weight's quite sufficient especially for beginners. But yeah, you can do this with dumbbells. And trying to do with barbells also can become quite awkward if you're trying to do a lunge or a split squat with the barbell across your back. It does tend to get pretty awkward. So yeah, in that case, dumbbells can have an advantage over barbells. So we've hit the legs, which is important. If you want to know how important legs are, scroll back to my back catalogue and listen to the episode Don't Be a Leg Day Sook. So let's talk about our upper body now. So this is where kind of a bit more, you kind of use both in various circumstances. So where when I'm doing legs, I'm using more barbells than dumbbells. When I'm doing upper body, it's kind of like a bit of each, depending on the circumstances. And also depends on what equipment's available at the gym. Obviously, if someone's, using the bench press, I might just get a couple of dumbbells, and get on a bench and press them instead of potentially waiting 20 minutes for someone to get off the bench press. So, that's another factor to consider as well. But, let's go to the bench press. So if as I said, look, the big advantage of a barbell is you can lift a lot of weight. So I do a lot of my bench pressing with the barbell, but I throw in dumbbells a lot too. not specifically into the same workout as the barbell press, but kind of I'll throw it in every now and then, do a bit of each, throughout my training schedule. Um, I like to do the dumbbells basically to get a good range of motion and to ensure that my weaker side is doing a fair share of work. I do like to do the barbell though, just to see how heavy I can lift. Um, so yeah, kind of like they both have their pros and cons. I throw them both into my routine, into my repertoire. Same with overhead presses. Um, the barbell, obviously, I can lift more than dumbbells. When I'm doing a barbell overhead press, I specifically watch myself in the mirror to make sure that that my weaker side, my non-dominant side, is doing its fair share of work. So the way I see that is I look in the mirror and make sure the bar is level the whole way up and the whole way down, and there's not like a slant um, going one way or the other. So yeah, I'm particularly conscious about that when I'm using barbells. Um, I do feel that I'll get a better range of motion when I'm using dumbbells for this. So I can actually get that kind of get that those dumbbells down more in like a natural line of my body than with the barbell. But once again, I'm sacrificing the amount I'm lifting for a better range of motion. Which is good. It's good to work on range of motion, but once again, it's good to also lift heavy. Yeah. So with the overhead press, just like the bench press, um, I use some of each in my repertoire. The last thing I'll talk about is the row movement or the rowing motion that's going to work on your upper back muscles. So these are like your lat pull downs, your seated cable rows, your barbell rows, your dumbbell rows, your pull ups. They all work on that upper back. Um, those muscles in your upper back. So I'm going to talk about the barbell and dumbbell lifts that you would generally use for those exercises for those muscle groups. So the main barbell one you use the bent over barbell row. So you kind of like you kind of almost start off in like a deadlift position, but then you kind of hinge your body forward and like kind of pull the barbell up vertically towards your body. The dumbbell alternative to that is the dumbbell row, which you kind of quite often support on the bench with one hand, one knee on the bench, or you might just like lean over and place a hand on, a bench or something, and you're pulling the dumbbell up in an upward motion. Um, so look, firstly, I want to point out the range of motion thing as I had before. Obviously your body's going to get in your way with a barbell. Um, so it's kind of you're not going to get the range of motion with a barbell. The second thing that's going on with the barbell is you're kind of like in a really awkward position, and I very rarely see this exercise done well, mainly because people are off balance in an awkward position, and once again they're kind of finishing the set not because their muscles are fatigued, but because they're off balance and awkward feeling, and they can't keep their balance any longer, so they finish the set. So when you're talking about, as I mentioned, doing a set, you want to think about the muscles that that you're targeting, and those muscles need to be the limiting factor of not doing any more reps. So when you finish your set, it should be because the muscles you're targeting can't do any more reps. So if you're finishing that set for any other reason, whether it's like other muscles of fatigue, for example, like your goblet squat where your arms can't hold weight any longer, or whether it's because you're off balance and kind of almost falling over, then that set's really become quite pointless. So, if you're doing, and look, if you love this exercise and you can do it well, I'm not saying anything bad about it. It's not a particularly bad exercise. I just don't see it done well that often, and even I find it quite awkward. I would much rather just go for the dumbbell alternate to this. I'm getting much better range of motion and I'm a lot more stable, so that means I can focus on the muscles I'm targeting a lot better and finish the set when those muscles that I'm targeting are fatigued, rather than finishing the set because I'm like off balance or about to face plant or something. So yeah, so for me, look for most of the others. So as I said, but then most things to do with legs, I'd rather use barbells just because I've kind of outgrown the dumbbell for that. The 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 exception to that is when I use when I'm doing split leg work. So split squats or lunges. Like I'll often use a dumbbell for that because you don't need a lot more weight because your the split work is a lot tougher, and also kind of having that barbell on can be a lot more awkward when you're trying to do like a walking lunge with a barbell on your back. But yeah, most leg work I'll use barbells, with the exception of split leg work. Um, Presses like bench presses and and overhead presses, we kind of use a bit of a mix of dumbbell and barbell depending on the situation, depending on what's available at the gym at the time, and depending on what I'm really trying to focus on, whether I'm trying to work on range of motion or overall weight. So I'll kind of throw both dumbbells and barbells into the mix there. With upper back work, um, as I mentioned, look, with upper back work, to be honest, majority of my upper back work is done with cables. So you see seated cable row and you let pull down. But when I do use free weights, definitely I would use the dumbbell row over the barbell row. But look, if you love the barbell row and can do it well, go for it. All power to you. I just ask you to make sure that the reason you're finishing that set is because the muscles you're targeting are fatigued, not for any other reason, like you're off balance or something like that. If you do find yourself finishing the set because you're off balance, maybe give the dumbbell row a go and see if you get more benefit out of that. So that's it, guys, for episode number 50. Thank you again for listening. I hope you all got something out of that. Once again, look, if this is the first episode you've listened to, there's another 49 episodes out there that you can have a listen to. Actually, it's more than 49. It's 49 full episodes, but there's a few like bonus episodes, shorter ones that I have in class. There's a full episode. I haven't really numbered them, but yeah, we'll check them out. For you guys who have been listening to me for the last 50 episodes, thanks heaps. I really do appreciate the time you take. Of all the podcasts that are out there, I really do appreciate that you've chosen to listen to mine. So thanks, guys, and I will talk to you next time for episode 51. Bye.